From the time Amelie could remember, everyone in the Mthembu household knew who the golden child was. It was never a secret. Lindo, her older brother, got all the praise, all the attention, and every ounce of patience their parents had to give. When he failed a test, her father would pat his shoulder and say, "You'll do better next time, son." But when Amelie brought home top marks, her mother barely looked up from her phone. At family dinners, her mother would beam as she talked about Lindo's bright future. "He's our star," she'd say proudly, even though he hadn't achieved much. Amelie would sit there quietly, her fork scraping her plate, pretending not to care. Inside, though, it stung. She worked twice as hard, but it never seemed to matter. While Lindo went out with friends and came home late, Amelie stayed in her room studying. She wasn't trying to impress anyone anymore. She just wanted to build something of her own, something they couldn't ignore. She learned early that silence could be powerful, that discipline could speak louder than praise. Still, every once in a while, she caught herself wondering why love had to feel like a competition. Why effort wasn't enough. But she never said a word. She smiled, kept her head down, and pushed forward. Amelie didn't know it then, but the quiet strength she built in those years would one day change everything and prove that the golden child wasn't always the one everyone chose. Years later, Amelie was living in Johannesburg, working as a financial assistant. Her life was steady but quiet, the kind of routine that kept her focused and out of trouble. Every morning she woke up before sunrise, caught the same taxi to work, and spent her days handling other people's money with calm precision. She was good at her job, but no one at home seemed to care. Her parents still treated her like she didn't exist. Whenever she visited on weekends, her father would greet her politely but immediately ask, "Have you heard from Lindo? How's he doing these days?" As if she'd come all that way just to give a report on her brother. Her mother would smile, hug her half-heartedly, and start talking about how your brother's going places. They never asked how Amelie was holding up. Not about her job, not about her life, not even about her dreams. The truth was, Lindo wasn't going anywhere. He still lived at home, driving their father's car, pretending he was running a business. On social media, he posted about client meetings and deals closing soon, but Amelie knew it was all for show. He had charm, that much was true, and somehow their parents still believed every word he said. Meanwhile, Amelie quietly carried the weight of responsibility. Every month, she sent money to her parents to help with bills, even though they never asked nicely. Her mother usually texted, "We're short this month. Just a small top-up, please. No thank yous. No check-ins." But Amelie sent it anyway. A part of her hoped that one day, they'd notice her kindness, that they'd finally see her heart. Her small apartment in Johannesburg was simple but warm. A few plants by the window, a bookshelf filled with old finance textbooks, and a single framed photo of her grandfather, the only person who ever made her feel seen. Some nights, she'd look at that photo and whisper, "I'm trying, Gogo. I'm really trying." But deep down, Amelie was tired. Tired of giving and getting nothing back. Tired of being the background character in her own family story. She wanted love that didn't need to be earned, respect that didn't depend on someone else failing. Then one afternoon, as she sat at her desk sorting through invoices, her phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. She almost ignored it, assuming it was another telemarketer. But something in her gut told her to pick up. "Miss Amelie Mthembu?" A voice said on the other end. "We're contacting you regarding the estate of Mr. Mthembu, your grandfather." Amelie froze, her heart thudding. Her grandfather? He had passed months ago, and no one had even told her. As the man continued speaking, Amelie felt the air shift around her. She didn't know it yet, but that single phone call was about to rewrite everything she thought she knew about love, loyalty, and what it really means to be seen. It was a quiet Thursday morning when Amelie's life changed forever. She was at her desk, sipping instant coffee, and replying to work emails when her phone buzzed with an unknown number. Normally, she would have ignored it, but something made her pick up. "Good morning. Is this Miss Amelie Mthembu?" A calm, professional voice asked. "Yes, speaking," she replied, slightly unsure. "This is Advocate Jacobs from Mthethwa and Partners. We're contacting you regarding the estate of the late Mr. Mthembu, your grandfather." Amelie froze. Her heartbeat quickened. "My grandfather?" she whispered. "He passed away?" "Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry for your loss," the man continued. "He passed away a few months ago." Amelie gripped the edge of her desk. No one had told her. Not her father, not her mother, not even Lindo. They'd gone through the funeral, the mourning, the family gatherings, and never thought she deserved to know. A mix of sadness and disbelief washed over her. The lawyer's voice pulled her back. "There's one more thing, Miss Mthembu. Your grandfather left behind a will. You were named as the primary beneficiary." Amelie blinked, unsure if she'd heard correctly. "I'm sorry, what?" "You are the main beneficiary," he repeated, his tone steady. Your grandfather left you assets totaling approximately $20 million. For a few seconds, the world around her went silent. The office noise faded, her hands started trembling, and she sank slowly into her chair. $20 million? That couldn't be real. There had to be a mistake. Are you sure? She finally managed to ask, her voice shaky. Yes, Miss Mthembu, the lawyer said gently. Your grandfather was very specific. He left detailed notes about his wishes. Amelie's eyes filled with tears she didn't expect. Not from the money, but from the fact that someone somewhere had thought she was worthy of something this big. Her grandfather had always been kind to her when she was little. He called her his little lion and said she had a heart made for great things. But she'd never imagined he saw her so deeply, enough to leave her everything he had. After the call ended, she sat there for a long time, staring at her phone. Her coffee had gone cold. Her body felt light, like she wasn't even in the room anymore. Her first thought wasn't about luxury or escape. It was about him, the man who had noticed her when no one else did. While her parents and brother had looked past her all her life, her grandfather had seen her worth quietly, without a word. And now, even in death, he had made sure the world would see it too. Amelie leaned back, whispered, "Thank you, Gogo." And for the first time in her life, she felt seen. That evening, Amelie couldn't focus on anything. She sat on her couch, the lawyer's words still echoing in her mind. Primary beneficiary, $20 million. It felt like a dream she was afraid to wake up from. To calm herself, she opened the old wooden box she kept under her bed, a box of memories she hadn't touched in years. Inside were faded photos, school certificates, and one small picture that made her heart ache. It was a photo of her and her grandfather sitting in his garden. She was maybe 8 years old, her hair in tiny braids, holding a mango in her hands. He was smiling at her like she was the only person in the world. On the back of the photo, in his neat handwriting, he'd written, "My little lion." A lump rose in her throat. He used to call her that all the time. "You're my little lion," he'd say, tapping her forehead gently. "You're quiet, but you have strength inside you." He was the only one who ever said those kinds of things to her. When her parents criticized her or brushed her aside, he'd step in and say, "Leave the child alone. She'll go far." But as Amelie grew older, those visits became less frequent. Her parents always had excuses. "Your grandfather's not feeling well," her mother would say. Or, "You have homework to do." She never questioned it back then, but now she understood. They'd kept her away from him on purpose. Her mother used to complain, "Your grandfather favors you too much. It's not right." And Amelie would just smile awkwardly, not realizing how serious her mother was about it. But now, everything clicked. Her grandfather must have seen how differently she was treated. He must have seen her trying, staying humble, working hard while everyone else ignored her. And quietly, he made his decision. He had seen her worth long before anyone else did, and he made sure she'd be rewarded for it one day. Amelie sat back and wiped her eyes. She wasn't sure whether to feel grateful, sad, or angry. It hurt to think that her parents had hidden his passing from her. They hadn't even let her say goodbye to the one person who truly cared for her. But at the same time, she felt a strange sense of peace. Maybe her grandfather knew exactly what he was doing, waiting for the right time for her to find out. She decided not to tell anyone yet. Not her parents. Not Lindo. Not anyone. She needed time to think, to breathe, to figure out what this meant for her life. But deep down, she knew her family. Secrets never stayed quiet for long in the Mthembu household. And when this one came out, and it would, nothing would ever be the same again. 2 weeks passed, and Amelie had started to adjust, at least a little, to the idea that she was now a millionaire. She hadn't touched the money yet. It still felt unreal. Most nights, she just sat in her apartment, thinking about her grandfather, and how he must have planned all of this so carefully. She wanted to protect what he'd given her, not just spend it. Then, one Saturday morning, there was a loud knock at her door. When she opened it, her mother was standing there, eyes wide, breath shaky, holding a folded newspaper, and behind her stood Lindo, arms crossed, jaw tight. Her mother didn't even say hello. She held out the paper like it was evidence. "Amelie, is this true?" Amelie froze. On the front page was a small section listing recent estate distributions. There it was in black and white. The late Mr. B. Mthembu, assets of approximately $20 million, awarded to Ms. Amelie Mthembu. Amelie's stomach dropped. Someone at the law firm must have leaked it to the press. She had been so careful to keep it quiet, but now the whole world, and worse, her family knew. Her mother's voice trembled. $20 million? Why would he leave you that? Amelie stayed silent, her lips pressed together. She didn't owe anyone an explanation, not anymore. Before she could even respond, Lindo pushed past their mother and stepped into the apartment. "You don't deserve that money," he shouted, his face red. "You never did anything for this family. I'm the one who was supposed to take care of them." Amelie looked at him calmly, her voice steady. "And yet, I'm the only one who ever showed up when you needed help. The only one who paid the bills when things got tough. The only one who called when no one else did." Her words cut through the room like a blade. Her mother blinked, speechless. Lindo clenched his fists but said nothing. The air between them grew thick, heavy with years of bitterness, jealousy, and silence that had never been broken. Her mother finally spoke, softer this time. "Amelie, you know how hard things have been. Maybe you can share some of it. Just a little. We're family." Amelie took a slow breath. "Family?" she said quietly. "You didn't even tell me my grandfather died." Her mother looked down, guilt flickering across her face. Lindo avoided her eyes completely. For the first time, Amelie wasn't the quiet one in the room. She wasn't the little girl waiting to be noticed. She stood tall, steady, unshaken. Her mother opened her mouth to speak again, but Amelie gently closed the door behind her. "I think you both should go," she said softly. And as they walked away down the hallway, Amelie finally felt the shift, the weight of all those years beginning to lift, replaced by something new, her own power. The morning after the confrontation, Amelie's phone wouldn't stop ringing. At first, she thought it was work, maybe her boss needing something. But when she looked at the screen, her stomach sank. It was Lindo. Again. She ignored the first few calls, but he kept going. 10 calls, then 20. Then messages started flooding in. "Lindo, come on, Amelie. We're family. You can't keep it all to yourself. Lindo, Dad says it's only fair you split it. Lindo, you know what Grandpa would have wanted." Amelie stared at her phone, a mix of anger and sadness rising inside her. It amazed her how quickly congratulations had turned into give me some. She hadn't even spent a cent of the money yet, and already everyone was acting like it belonged to them. By noon, her parents started calling too. Her mother's voice came through, sweet at first but sharp underneath. "Amelie, darling, we just want to talk. You know how hard things are for your brother. He's struggling to get his business back up. Be a good sister, help him out a little." Her father chimed in next, his tone heavy with guilt. "You've always been generous, Amelie. Don't let money change you." Amelie felt her chest tighten. That old familiar ache returned, the same one that had followed her since childhood, the one that made her believe she had to keep giving, even when she had nothing left. She remembered all the times she gave up her savings for her parents' bills, how she stayed quiet when they praised Lindo for things she'd actually done, how she made herself smaller so everyone else could feel big. But this time felt different. She took a deep breath, held her phone close, and said calmly, "For years I gave and you took. Every time you needed something, I was there. And it was never enough. Now that I finally have something that's mine, you still want to take it. But I'm done shrinking so you can stand taller." There was silence on the other end. Then her father sighed deeply. "So that's how it is?" Amelie nodded to herself. "That's how it's always been," she said quietly, then ended the call. For a moment, she just sat there, staring at her reflection in the dark phone screen. Her hands were shaking, but not from fear, from release. For the first time in her life, she had said no. The calls kept coming for the rest of the day, but she didn't answer. Instead, she turned off her phone, made a cup of tea, and sat by the window watching the city lights flicker. It hurt, of course it did. But somewhere deep inside, a small, strong voice whispered what she'd always needed to hear. "You don't owe them your peace to prove your love." It didn't take long for things to get ugly. After Amelie refused to share the money, her family's kindness disappeared overnight. The calls that once came with fake sweetness turned into angry voicemails and guilt-filled messages. Her mother texted almost every day. "We raised you. How can you forget where you came from?" Another one read, "Money can't replace family. You'll regret this." Her father preferred voice notes, long, emotional ones that sounded more like lectures than love. "You're letting greed poison your heart," he said in one. "A real daughter would take care of her family. You owe us that much." Amelie listened to them once, then deleted everything. Every word felt like a knife. It wasn't about love anymore. It was about control. Then one afternoon, as she was leaving work, she heard someone yelling in the parking lot. Her heart sank when she saw who it was, Lindo. He was pacing near her car, shouting loud enough for everyone to hear. "That money is ours, Amelie. You think you're better than us now? You wouldn't even have that job without this family." People stopped and stared. Security started moving closer. Amelie's hands trembled as she walked toward her car, but she kept her head high. "Go home, Lindo," she said quietly. "You're embarrassing yourself." He laughed bitterly. "You're the embarrassment. You stole what was meant for all of us." She didn't answer. She got in her car and drove away, but the moment haunted her all night. She never thought her own brother would humiliate her in public. The next morning, she called her lawyer. Within a few hours, a formal notice was filed, a legal warning forbidding any member of her family from contacting or harassing her. It broke her heart to take that step, but she knew she had to protect her peace. But the story didn't stay private for long. Somehow, the news got out. A local blog picked it up first. "Young woman inherits $20 million, family furious over will." Then bigger outlets ran it too. Social media lit up. People she didn't even know were tagging her name, calling her the girl who inherited millions. Strangers online praised her strength. Good for her, one comment said. She earned her peace. Others weren't so kind. She abandoned her family for money, someone wrote. How heartless. Emily scrolled through the comments late at night, trying not to let them get to her. But what hurt the most wasn't the strangers. It was knowing her own family probably believed the worst about her. Still, somewhere deep down, she understood something she'd never seen clearly before. The line between love and envy wasn't thick or obvious. It was razor thin, and once crossed, there was no going back. For the first time, Emily stopped hoping for her family's approval. She realized she didn't need it anymore. Months went by, and life slowly began to settle into a new rhythm. The noise around Emily's inheritance started to fade, but the cracks in her family only grew deep. Lindo's so-called business ventures finally fell apart. The flashy posts stopped. The expensive clothes disappeared. Rumor had it he'd been kicked out of his apartment for not paying rent. Her parents, who once treated him like the family's pride and joy, now whispered about him in embarrassment. He made poor choices. Her mother said one day on a phone call Emily didn't ask for. He just got mixed up with the wrong people. There was no warmth in her voice anymore, just disappointment. Emily listened quietly, saying little. She didn't feel revenge or joy, just a quiet sadness for how things had turned out. Lindo had spent his whole life chasing approval, but when the money disappeared, so did everyone's love. While her family argued and blamed each other, Emily focused on building something real. She met with financial advisors and learned how to grow her wealth wisely. Instead of spending it on luxury, she invested in small local businesses, young people trying to start something of their own. She funded school supplies for children in her old neighborhood and started a scholarship in her grandfather's name for hardworking students who'd been overlooked, just like she once was. She didn't make a big show of it. No press, no social media posts. She simply wanted to do what felt right, to honor the man who had seen her worth before anyone else did. One sunny afternoon, she stood on the stage at a small community center opening she'd helped fund. The room was filled with teachers, parents, and students. Behind her hung a framed portrait of her grandfather, smiling that same gentle smile she remembered from her childhood. When it was her turn to speak, she took a breath and smiled softly. True wealth isn't about money, she said, her voice steady but full of emotion. It's about how you use it to build others. My grandfather taught me that when I was just a girl. He said, Emily, when you rise, make sure others rise with you. The crowd applauded, and for the first time in a long time, Emily felt something pure, peace. She didn't need her parents' praise or her brother's validation anymore. Her grandfather's pride was enough, even from beyond the grave. As she looked up at his portrait, she whispered to herself, You were right, Gogo. You saw me. The applause continued, but Emily wasn't thinking about the crowd. She was thinking about the quiet strength it took to get here, to stand tall in her own light, no longer the forgotten daughter, no longer the shadow of the golden child. In that moment, she finally understood what legacy truly meant. It was a cold, rainy evening when Emily heard a knock at her gate. She wasn't expecting anyone. The sky was dark, the wind howled, and the rain fell so hard it blurred everything outside. When she stepped closer and looked through the gate, she froze. It was Lindo. He was soaked from head to toe, his clothes clinging to him, his shoes caked with mud. The once proud brother who used to strut around in designer clothes now looked small and tired. His shoulders were slumped, his eyes red. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The rain did all the talking. Finally, he said softly, I'm sorry, Emily. I messed up. His voice cracked halfway through the sentence. Emily just stood there, studying him. This was the same brother who had shouted at her in parking lots, who had told her she didn't deserve a cent. The same brother who used to look at her with arrogance now couldn't even meet her eyes. She could see the guilt written all over his face. And something else too, shame. She opened the gate slowly and stepped aside. Come in, she said quietly. Lindo hesitated, then walked in, dripping water onto her floor. Emily handed him a towel without a word. He took it, drying his face, his hands trembling slightly. The silence between them was heavy but not angry, just filled with everything they hadn't said all these years. He finally spoke again. I lost everything, Em. The business, the apartment. Mom and Dad stopped helping. They said I needed to grow up. He laughed bitterly, shaking his head. I thought I had it all figured out. Turns out, I was just pretending. Emily listened quietly, her heart softening. For so long, she had dreamed of hearing an apology, but now that it was here, it didn't feel like victory. It felt sad. You don't need my money, Lindo, she said gently. You need to fix your heart. He looked up at her, tears gathering in his eyes. Maybe you were the strong one all along, he whispered. I used to think you were jealous of me, but you were just trying to survive. Emily didn't gloat or smile. She just nodded, her voice calm but honest. Now you know how it feels to be invisible. Lindo swallowed hard, his eyes lowering to the floor. Yeah, he said quietly. I do. The rain outside began to ease, the sound softening into a steady rhythm. Amelie poured him a cup of tea and placed it in front of him. For the first time in years, they sat together in silence. Not as rivals, not as enemies, but as two people finally seeing each other clearly. And though forgiveness didn't come easily, that night was the first small step toward peace, the kind that money could never buy. Years later, Amelie sat in her office overlooking Durban's skyline, the golden morning light spilling through the windows. The city below buzzed with life, the same city where she had once started with nothing but quiet determination. Now, her businesses were thriving, her charity was growing, and people spoke her name with respect. Her walls were lined with photos, students who had received her scholarships, small business owners she'd helped, and community projects she had funded. But the picture that meant the most sat right on her desk, her grandfather, smiling in his old garden, the words "My Little Lion" written on the back. Her parents had grown older and quieter over the years. The calls that used to be filled with guilt and demands were now softer. They no longer asked for money, only for her time. Sometimes she visited them for tea, and the conversations were polite, almost gentle. The wounds hadn't completely healed, but the anger had faded. Time, as always, had a way of softening things. Every month, Amelie drove to the cemetery with a bouquet of fresh white lilies. She'd place them on her grandfather's grave and sit for a while, talking to him softly, as if he were still listening. She told him about the children whose lives had changed, about how she was finally happy, about how she understood now what he had seen in her all along. Standing there one morning, she smiled and whispered, "You didn't just leave me money, Gogo. You left me freedom." As she walked away, the sun began to rise behind her, bright, warm, full of promise. It was a new day, and Amelie knew deep in her heart she had become everything they once said she couldn't be.